super excited to have you on here.
Thanks for having
Um, your background is hugely relevant to the people that tune into this and watch this. And so I wanted to have you on to kind of talk about all things content, address some of the pain points that we hear often around those more technical founders or founders in general who have gone through this fundraising process know that there's such an importance of showing up online, building trust and credibility through content, but maybe don't know where to begin. And
Yes,
I think, you have a fantastic viewpoint on this and would love to pick your brain for the next hour or so. So
I'd be happy to. Yeah, I know you said it's great if it's actionable, so I'll try to give as many actionable, tactical things as we possibly can.
yeah, I think there's enough podcasts and webinars where people just talk about random things and their
Yeah,
takes, but let's make these action oriented. First, want to maybe just kick off by giving a little bit about your background. You've had a very unique background, and yeah, would love to hear more about it.
sure. Yeah, so for the last 3 years, I was at Andreessen Horowitz as the head of social media. So I was doing all of our social from Twitter to Instagram, LinkedIn, and also providing support to general partners who were posting on LinkedIn and Twitter and all the following. Some helping our portfolio companies as well. So if they needed help with something, we were there as a resource for them. I ended that job about a month ago, and now I'm going to be starting my own social media consulting firm, which I'm really excited about. It's going to be called Press Publish. But prior to working at Andreessen Horowitz, my whole career was in news. And I really always saw myself being a journalist and went to journalism school and have a very traditional news background, but also felt myself pulled to sort of the digital side, the social side, but really wanted to show that I had those chops as a reporter. So I'm kind of bounced between different roles at different news organizations, but I've written for the Wall Street Journal, for CNN. Right before I was at Andreessen Horowitz, I had been recruited by CNN to work on CNN Plus. So
Yeah.
that was an amazing experience and I learned so much. I mean, we all know CNN Plus was not long for this world. So we all got laid off once they decided not to continue with it, unfortunately. But it was fascinating to learn about streaming and how news was going to become part of streaming. So, yeah, have
Yeah.
had a lot of unique and interesting experiences in the news world from super traditional, like writing for the Miami Herald, to, the more, innovative like CNN Plus.
Yeah. What drew you to A16Z, or how did you get connected with them?
Yeah, so at the time, A16Z had a publication called Future that was a little bit more separate from the main brand. And I saw a job posting. I know a lot of people have the feeling or perception that if you're not in the venture capital world or like the tech world, that it's really hard to break into.
Hmm.
But I think I just had this unique experience because they were looking for someone with basically exactly my background to work on Future, to do audience development and social. And actually, the week that I joined Andreessen Horowitz, they decided not to do Future anymore, which was crazy. But, that's how fast things move. And, those kinds of experiments don't always last. So basically, we pivoted my role from doing that for Future to doing social for the firm at large. So basically the content that was on Future kind of got absorbed back into just being on Andreessen Horowitz website, and we built out the social accounts in a way that they really hadn't been previously.
Any learnings from your kind of traditional media background that you took into the venture capital world and social media as a whole?
Honestly, a lot. I thought that they would be more different than they actually were, but Andreessen Horowitz focuses a lot on thought leadership and talking about overall trends. And so a lot of the same principles still applied when it comes to just making those really important pieces of content interesting. So you definitely have the importance of a compelling headline, compelling social copy, compelling leads, like all of the same principles that I applied to making news interesting. I think we were able to apply to content at Andreessen Horowitz. Still think a background in news and journalism is highly useful and applicable to those kinds of things. I also think just having a really high bar for quality was something that I brought from news to my role because
Mhm.
I think, we talk about content and just getting it out there. And I think there definitely is a place for that. But part of our goal was to build a consistent brand and a really, powerful and high quality brand. And so I was able to use that kind of news experience and editing and reporting experience to keep the bar really high. Like, I think that's something you're used to in news. You get edited, you go back and forth a bunch of times, you make sure that the final product is something you're super, super proud of. So that was really the lens that we used, where it wasn't just about like getting things out quickly, it was about doing it in the right way and really preserving that quality bar.
How do you guys think about that balance? Because I think there is a mentality, especially at early stage, with just ship it and get it out there and kind of test and
Mhm.
iterate. How do you balance that speed of the market and speed of pace with still maintaining that quality bar that, can impact your brand so much?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think something that applies to Andreessen Horowitz that doesn't apply as much to a startup, or especially an early stage startup, is that by the time I joined, Andreessen Horowitz was already an iconic brand. And so there was more potential damage to be done by doing not quality content than it would be if you're at an earlier stage where just not as many people are paying attention. So I think that that was part of why we had to be meticulous about every single thing that came out of an Andreessen Horowitz account because I wanted it to reflect positively on the legacy and the just importance of the brand overall. And a lot of trust was needed. Like we're talking about billions of dollars, so we really didn't have a lot of room to just try stuff and see what would work. It would be written about if we
Yeah.
tried something crazy and it didn't work. But I think the luxury of being on earlier on in your social journey is you can do that a bit more. So you can lower the bar for yourself a little bit. I mean, I still think you should prioritize quality and not just try to get things out there a million times and throw spaghetti at the wall. I'm not a big fan of that strategy. I think you should be as strategic as you possibly can be, but also don't let it keep you from doing anything. And that's what I see a lot of the time and what I have conversations with founders about, which is like a lot of them are like, well, I just don't know. And I don't publish anything because I don't know if it's good. And I understand that feeling because you're like, well, it's kind of better. Maybe it's better to do nothing so that nothing is bad. I definitely don't think it's better to do nothing. So I think if you can find that sweet spot between like something you feel really proud of and a cadence that you think you can sustain, like that's really the sweet spot.
Yeah. I think with this mentality and as the narrative of founders or early stage companies building in public is becoming more of a notion,
Yes.
and with the, subsequent rise of AI, everyone is using ChatGPT to write their social content.
Mhm.
What's your view on this? Are we heading towards a world where all content just sounds the same and has all those telltale AI signs?
It's funny, I just made a TikTok about this. So my view is that currently ChatGPT or other tools are better as an editor than they are as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you can still really tell when something is completely written by ChatGPT. I mean, there's some of the telltale signs that everyone's talked about, like a lot of M dashes and whatever. But I think it's more about the tone all sounding the same, and there's just sort of like a flatness about it.
Mm.
And I think what an advantage that you could actually have right now is that at a time where people are starting to use ChatGPT and other bots, I think that you can stand out more by like visually differentiating yourself because
Mm.
something that you can obviously ask ChatGPT or another Claude or whatever a question and they can give you an answer. And that's an amazing use of that tool. But what those tools can't do is make it sound like it just hits differently, right? Coming from another founder, coming from someone who has a lot of experience in the space. If you're showing your face and using your voice to answer those questions, that's very different from the experience that you're going to get talking to a chatbot about it. So
Yeah.
I think right now it's actually more important than ever to put your own spin on it because if you're producing something that just looks exactly the same as what everyone else does, you don't have any differentiation. And so I think the more personal you can make it, we're seeing such a trend now toward this like direct kind of communication. I think TikTok has a lot to do with that because it's this very unvarnished, very direct, intimate relationship. I think podcasting does too because
Mhm.
you're carrying an earbud around with you and you feel like you're in the room with the people podcasting. So I think actually the more personal, the more intimate you can make it, the more you will stand out from just the flatness of what we're seeing across the board.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of the founders or executives that I work with get wrong as well is because it's LinkedIn, they feel like it needs to always be highly professional and buttoned up and almost sterile to a certain point and
Yep.
stripped of all personality. How I know you produce TikTok content as well. Do you make a conscious effort to differentiate your tone between the two platforms or do they kind of meld together?
It's interesting because I've seen other marketers and social people in the space commenting on this as well. I think initially we thought LinkedIn was going to be this video heavy platform. And what I think a lot of us are seeing is that written content is still performing just as well, if not better. I'm using TikTok, and TikTok is only video. So I'm really using TikTok as my video platform, partly because I just feel more comfortable. Like, I think the there is a different tone and sort of like a different community between the 2. I feel like TikTok still has a kind of Finsta, like the adults aren't here kind of vibe. And so I
Yeah.
feel like I can be a little bit more myself on TikTok. And I do feel like I need to be a bit more professional on LinkedIn. But I definitely think, as you're saying, there's a trend now on LinkedIn where we're getting away from the sterile content, injecting more personality into it. So it should not be sterile. But I haven't been brave enough to post a video of myself on LinkedIn. I think I'm gonna do it soon, but I still feel like I am connected to a lot of current and former coworkers and stuff, so there's a little more polish or maybe just like intimidation factor there. Same thing for founders, I think. Like they're thinking investors are here and like maybe while I build in public on TikTok in this more fun way, the stuff I'm proud of goes more on LinkedIn. So I do think there are some differences still, but I think if you're good at one, you can be good at the other because a lot of the same things apply. Like a very interesting hook to draw people in, being succinct, not being too long-winded for no reason. So I think they actually kind of complement one another and they help you sharpen your skills on in both areas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on TikTok because this is definitely LinkedIn focused, but I think the anonymity that came with that started with TikTok,
Yep,
where a lot of people didn't have the same followers they had on Instagram or the
exactly.
colleagues they had on LinkedIn. It kind of was, you grew a new audience from day one
Yes.
where there's obviously, it feels like there's higher stakes posting that type of content on LinkedIn, but definitely having a defined personality or a point of view is always going to help you stand out on any platform, really.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Speaking of kind of other AI tools, I'm sure you've tested a bunch of them. Are there ones that you are seeing beneficial for content creation? What are they and kind of why do you like them?
Yeah. So one of my favorite uses for AI tools right now is actually transcription, which I'm sure a lot of people are experimenting with those tools. I'm currently using Fireflies because I have a colleague who likes to use it. So it kind of got me into it. But I found that to be hugely helpful in recording conversations with founders so that, it's easier for them. Maybe they have time to have a quick conversation, a quick call that you can then use that transcription to help them. Write pieces. So I think founders could even do that for themselves. Like if you feel more comfortable speaking and you could just get your thoughts out there, record them, and then turn that into a post more easily. I think that's actually an excellent use of these newer tools. As I was saying before, I don't use a lot of tools to actually write. I do use them to edit. I prefer ChatGPT just because that's what I started using first. So a lot of the time I will feed more like final copy through ChatGPT and just be like, is there anything I could shorten or, can we change the tone of the top? And sometimes I don't take the suggestions, but it's nice to just kind of like have that final eye if you don't have an editor. So I really like it more for that reason. I haven't been using AI tools that much for image generation, although I know that's very hot to do. And a lot of partners at A16Z have done a good job of like documenting their journey using them, especially Justine Moore and Olivia Moore. I highly recommend following them
Mhm.
because they talk all the time about Midjourney and like different tools that they're using. But I'm always curious to hear more. I'm like every time I see content about what tech stack people are using with their AI tools, I save it because I have so many more things that I want to try. One of my other favorite uses beyond transcription is actually talking about performance with an agent. So I've been using ChatGPT to talk about LinkedIn content performance and TikTok content performance because I actually really like the conversation aspect to it, where you can kind of be like, let's talk about why this post might not have performed as well. And then you can kind of talk about it. And I've just found that to be really helpful. You can upload previous content and make a little tracker for yourself, save that, and then the agent can help you refer back to what performs well and kind of talk you through why maybe a recent piece didn't perform well. So I see that as being like a hugely helpful tool for people, especially since it's low cost and a lot of social analytics tools are very expensive.
Yeah.
Another one I love is called Measure Studio,
Hmm.
and that has a lot of AI elements to it, and it's fantastic for talking about performance. So if you're looking for like a fairly low cost, AI heavy tool to talk just about how your content is doing, especially for like a company, Measure Studio is my number one tool for that.
That's awesome. I got to check that out.
Yeah, they're good.
I feel like I'm the opposite end where I try to test all of the tools and I end up with just like free trials of everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing actually makes it to production because I'm just experimenting with all of them. So,
Totally. I feel like I'm about to embark on a journey of that because someone told me that they like Claude better than ChatGPT for social stuff. So I'm like, okay, now I got to try Claude. So yeah, I'm definitely about to do more experimenting.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I use Claude a lot. And to the transcription side of things, with a lot of founders getting over that mental hurdle of like what to post, I always
Totally.
recommend taking in their sales calls, loading a few of them up and asking for
Ooh,
trends and questions that their prospects are asking,
I love that.
and then creating content around those answers because it's a really not that much additional work and a good place to start that helps your
That's a
sales
great
process.
idea. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Speaking of executives becoming thought leaders and posting more, I know a lot of the work that you've done has been help building those programs for companies
Mhm.
through A16Z. What is probably your best advice to teams who want to start posting content on how to do it without it feeling forced?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, it's about identifying your content pillars, which I know sounds kind of in the weeds, but it basically just means finding like 3 or 4 topics that you feel like you are comfortable talking about consistently and sticking to them, because I think that does help you get over the sort of blank page problem where you're just like, I don't know what to write about. So try to tell founders or individuals that you should identify those based on who your ICP, your ideal customer profile is, and think about 3 to 4 topics that they will be consistently interested in that are relevant to your business, because then at least you have a framework to be like, okay, under this topic, like I can maybe talk about these 5 or 6 subtopics, and then you really guide yourself. And I think it's okay to deviate from that sometimes and, talk about your vacation or whatever, because that just personalizes you and humanizes you, which is great. But you should do that infrequently. And most of the time, you should be sticking to, what your main topics are. So I find that that really helps. I also think just having a running list of ideas is an underrated thing to do, like on a notes app or something that's
Mhm.
easy for you, whatever your preferred way of doing that is. I use a Google Doc and a notes app, and just I'm constantly adding to it. So again, you're not just sitting down like, what should I write today? But, something that you thought of on your walk, you can be like, oh yeah, I was going to write about that. So again, like the AI tools can be good for that too. Like if I actually have had some of my most success talking about what topics I've written about that have done well, and then ChatGPT, my preferred one, kind of helps say, well, if those did well, have you thought about talking about this? And that's really helpful too. So all of those things can kind of help contribute to having a constant log of ideas. So you're not just starting fresh every single time. And obviously using comments as a way to come up with future posts too. Like if someone leaves a really great comment on one of your posts, you can always use that as inspiration to answer their question or address their comment. And I think that's another great way to just like keep the content going.
I love the content pillars. It's something that I think are really helpful and can be a guiding principle. I think all of this is like assuming that someone knows that they should be doing this, but really from what you've seen, like what level priority should this be? Is this something that, executives or founders should be spending an hour on a month, an hour a week? Like how valuable can this really be for early stage teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be different for everyone, of course, but I think that it's just a very underrated way of getting inbounds. Like, I think that if you're spending a lot of your time on sales and trying to figure out how to reach your customer, like this is probably one of the most efficient ways you can possibly do that by, and that's really like what Andreessen Horowitz built its whole concept of creating content on. I mean, I can't take credit for that. My boss, Margaret Van Makers, my former boss, was the architect behind that. And she really created something that a lot of people tried to copy over time and
Yeah.
like weren't necessarily able to. She was very forward thinking on that and started that a long time ago before that was even the thing to do. But I will say that it's, I think, clear now that that's one of the best ways you could be spending your time. So I usually recommend, I think founders could easily be posting once a week on LinkedIn, if not more. So I think I suggest kind of time blocking because I think that helps, just with scheduling and making sure you've are accountable and actually do it. So I usually recommend like maybe 2 hours time blocked to actually draft and write your piece. I also recommend time blocking time every day, maybe 10 minutes to engage with other content because
Hmm.
that also really helps you like
Mhm.
be a native on that platform and actually, connect with other people so that they will connect with your content. So I think if you're most people, I mean, again, like I'm starting my own startup. I have 2 little kids. Like, I know that it's really hard to make time for it, but I think that it will naturally replace some of the other efforts that you've been making to get new clients or, whatever that might be. And so of course, I'm biased, but I highly, highly recommend doing it because a small amount of time can actually yield like massive results. And once you get in the habit of it, it takes way less time too. You just get faster and faster at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, I know you brought some slides. I would love to dive into those.
Yeah.
And do you mind giving a little context of what these slides were originally from and just talk about, those workshops that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, some of my friends who used to work at Y Combinator were seeing a really similar need where a lot of founders, need a lot of support when it comes to marketing and comms and social, and they want to do it fast because they have a lot of other things going on. So, my friend Joan, who now works at Scale, the venture capital firm, she came up with this idea to do a 1 day summit where founders can come and do tactical sessions with us. So alumni of A16Z and of Y Combinator who really like have been in the trenches with founders in this way. And we talk them through really strategic events, marketing, comms, social, and they come away with really actionable advice on what they're going to do for their company. So we did our first one a few weeks ago in San Francisco, and this was my session, my keynote session on like some brutal truths about what's working in social and what's not.
Awesome. Well, let's dive into it. That'd be great.
Yeah, so I want to give just like an overview of what is currently working on social media because this changes so much and I want to just ground everyone in sort of where we are in this current moment. And what we're seeing right now is this like very direct, honest communication with the audience with not a lot in between yourself and that viewer. So I use the example of the New York mayoral race right now because that has been written about quite a bit that Mamdani is using very good social media video that feels very personal and direct. And Cuomo like has actually been struggling a bit with messaging. We don't have to get too much into the mayoral race, but
Yeah.
it's something that has really distinguished Mamdani as a candidate because he's doing this very of the moment kind of communication that feels real.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that with founders too, and across the tech space where there's very much this shift to wanting to do media appearances that are more scrappy. Like I don't know if you know TBPN, that it's a streaming tech show with 2 founders as the hosts. And they have this very lo-fi kind of approach where they're doing, Zoom recording, or I don't know what they use, but a very little fanfare. It's very
Yeah.
direct. And the founders that they have on are being really honest and jokey. And, it's this very like unvarnished type of communication that's really popular right now.
Mhm.
So that's one, and I think if you're not doing that and you're still have this very, like, corporate sort of polished look, it's just not going to resonate the way that the more direct form is taking.
What's the balance there? Because earlier we are talking about like being personal, having a personality, but maybe
Mhm.
still wanting to show up as a professional. Like, how would you give advice to someone who still wants to show their personality, but not just, be too jokey?
Yeah, absolutely. I usually say that you should use the rule of what you would talk about at a dinner party or, like, next to someone on an airplane.
Mm.
We're not talking about things that are too personal, like, you're not talking I mean, again, some founders deviate from this and it works for them, but I think that's unusual, so I usually say, you're mostly talking about the work. If you're gonna give anything else, it's that dinner party rule of, like, no politics, no religion. I mean, again, you can
Yeah.
if that fits for you and you want to talk about your religion because that's something that's important to you, just own it and do it. But, if you want to use the kind of like what's too personal to share, I wouldn't recommend talking about like family issues that are not appropriate for the
Yeah.
masses or things like that. So I also think that it's just some small changes. Like it's not drastically different. It's more just like instead of going into a studio and having a full setup with a professional camera and stuff, maybe it makes more sense to be your background is, where you usually do your work and you film on an iPhone instead of
Mhm.
having a crew come. So it's like these small changes that just make it feel a little bit more personal and less like you're in a studio or on a news show. Like these small changes, I think, can really make that work. And even like the idea of saying something more naturally versus scripting it first and then reading it, I think makes a huge difference. Just speaking like you normally would. I think executives are coming across much better when they do that. Like I'm thinking of Jamie Dimon. Like there's certain
Mhm.
people that have been able to successfully kind of change public perception by just appearing a little bit more approachable and real.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the next one is that the platforms are getting a lot more saturated, which means like a few months ago, just simply being on a platform was an advantage. And now companies and founders and executives know that they should be doing it. So it's just raising the bar for quality and really trying to get people's attention. So it puts a lot more importance on those first few words or the first few seconds of a video because you're just not going to be able to compete with other people producing the same type of content if you're not drawing people in immediately because they just have so many other options for what they could be watching and reading. So that is increasingly important in this moment. Um, and then the last one, I just always advocate for building an audience over chasing virality, just because if you have an idea that you think can be viral, I support you and I say, like, try it. Like, we've definitely seen companies like Cluely be really successful doing that. But that's not something you can control. And what you can control is being consistent, building an audience that really cares about you. And the downside to virality sometimes is that you might get a lot of views, but it might not translate into anything that's actually useful for your business. So, that's just something I always caution around because it feels great. It feels great to get likes and comments and like be the talk of the town. But if people remember that, but they don't ever buy your product or sign up for your product or whatever it might be, it's like that was great, but like it didn't actually move the needle for you.
Yeah, I think that that last one really resonates, and I think just goes back to the old, slow and steady wins the race,
Yes.
and usually with virality, if you have a post that goes viral, it's very rare that that actually translates. It's usually the wrong ICP that you're getting in front of.
Exactly. Yeah, and you might get a lot of like negative comments and stuff. Like there's a lot of downsides that people I think don't realize until you have a viral moment and you're like, actually, that kind of sucked.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this was a slide that we kind of like went through, but I'll read the ones that are a little blacked out. The first
Yeah.
one is what's in. This is what's in right now. So this is what you should do. The first one is zero click content, which means you're giving a lot of value in the social posts. Like a while ago, it used to be that you could just tease something and be like, read more here, and not write a lot there. But what the platforms are really prioritizing right now is that they want you to stay on the platform. So you have to
Mhm.
give a lot of information in the post itself instead of inviting them to click out right away. So I use the example of if you wrote a blog post in the past, you might say, like, this is what I wrote about, read it at this link. And then people would immediately click and leave. But
Mhm.
now you should pretty much be putting every single thing that you said in the blog post in your LinkedIn copy or your Twitter copy because the algorithms are deprioritizing content where people click out immediately because they want people to stay. So, zero click means you don't require people to click. You can read everything right there.
Yeah. One full thought in the post.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, you're not teasing for the answer to the question. Another one is just adding value, which is kind of what I just said. Like you want to pack as much value as you possibly can into the post itself. So if you can include like an interesting infographic that people might want to share or save for later because it's really helpful to them, like that's a great thing to do. Helping people like solve problems that they might be experiencing. Like you should be really thinking about how does this help them? It's not just about what you want to talk about. It's about is this valuable to my audience? And if so, what are they going to do with that information? So that is a great way to build, especially in the beginning, because people always want things that make their life easier. And so I always suggest like if there's things that you can share that are applicable to other people, that's a great way to start and like really gain traction in the beginning. Um,
If
yeah,
I
go ahead.
may, I wanna add one point to this because I see a lot of founders make this mistake, is the value should be something that's truly valuable to who you're talking to, not talking about value that you've created at your company, because then that
Yes,
becomes very self-promotional, which people have a
absolutely.
very low tolerance for.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's not just saying, like, why you are valuable, like, selling is something that's out, like,
Yeah.
that I'm gonna talk about in another slide. It's more about, like, can you help other people solve a problem that you had by saying what you did, right?
Right.
Like, and maybe it's sharing your tech stack with them, like, that's a very popular thing to do right now, like, "I've tried a lot of AI tools, and these are the ones that I find the most helpful, like, I
Mhm.
use this for this for this," like, giving them advice and value in that post that they can use.
Absolutely.
The next one is the inverted pyramid, which comes from my journalism days. And I think other people use this too, where it's about giving the value first. Like at the tip of the pyramid is giving the value first and then giving the details later. And I see so many people doing the opposite, where you kind of back into a story and you're like, the other day I was walking down the street and one thing that really struck me, like you have to just give the value right away. So you should be, if it's that you're hiring, you should say, we are hiring right away and then say like this is what we're looking for and blah blah blah. Like you have to think of what's going to catch people's attention first and then get broader from there, but you have to really lead with an interesting lead.
Mhm.
And then the next one is working with influencers, creators, and employee advocacy programs. This is something that is very popular right now, and I think is the future because of this sort of direct, like less polished approach. The difference between influencers and UGC creators is that influencers are using their likeness and their platform and they're talking about your product from their own account. UGC creators, user generated content creators, are filming content that feels very natural, but then giving it to you to post to your own account. So those are slightly different use cases, but I think both have a place in strategy. And the last one, employee advocacy programs, is something that I'm like weirdly interested in right now, which is actually incentivizing your employees to post about the company.
Hmm.
I think the days are a little bit gone where people just expected their employees to do that for free because I think we're seeing now that influence and posting has a lot of value. And so I think the more you tell your employees that you care about that and you respect that by giving them some kind of bonus or some kind of incentive to actually post, I think that's very interesting right now and something that more companies should consider. Because you probably have employees that are good at creating content and they know your product the best.
Yeah. How do you govern that? Because this is a big 180 from a few years ago where, you know, the company wanted to be heavily involved if you represented the brand in some way. How do you A, should you worry about how that is controlled internally? And B, how do you do that without limiting creativity?
I think you should be worried about it. I think it's probably a good idea to have some kind of submission process where you, especially if you're in an industry that requires compliance, like venture capital or any other kind of like finance, there should be a level of that because you don't want anyone posting something that's not compliant if they're, representing your company. So I do think there should be some kind of light, submission process where they can say, this is my draft. Does this look okay? Great. I'll go ahead and post it. Because that does reflect on your company and, you should take that seriously. Um, but I don't, again, like you just said, it shouldn't hinder people's creativity either, where you're giving them too much direction and micromanagement because then it doesn't feel like them. So I would let them mostly drive and think of your role as more like an approval process of a yes or
Mhm.
a no.
Yeah. And then for the founders who find this as an interesting strategy, what are some interesting ways or what are the ways to incentivize employees to do this?
Yeah, I think if you have equity, that's already incentivizing. So, if you have some kind of employee equity, they may be incentivized regardless. But especially if you don't, I think it's very important to give them, yeah, some kind of bonus or a commission based model where they have a unique link that if
Mhm.
a certain number of people sign up from their post, they get a certain percentage of that. So I think there's a few ways you could go about it, but I just think it's great to show your employees that you care about it and value it. Some people do it like a competition style where if you
Hmm.
get the most, impressions or whatever, like you won that week or month and you
Yeah.
get a prize. So I think there's different ways. You don't have to just like give away your company to your employees if they post about it on Instagram, but like I think there's creative ways to think of how do I let them know that I truly appreciate it.
Yeah. A new way to get to employee of the month.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And the last one, the strong point of view, is what this example is, which is, you know, really coming out with what your thoughts are. I see this all the time where people give a very like lukewarm, wishy-washy take on something. And it's like, if your take isn't strong, it might just not be a strong social post. And maybe you should just not write about it at
Yeah.
all. Because if you're coming out in the middle and you're like, this was kind of good, it's like, well, people don't know what to do about that. So if you instead write it like this Chris Dixon example where he's clearly saying like it's excellent and marks a huge step forward for crypto in America. Like you
Yeah.
need to really distill your thoughts down into your biggest takeaway and lead with that.
Hmm. Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. What's out?
What's out? The image here is not what's out. I want to say that. Like we didn't put in any really bad examples. This is actually a good example, so I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
He's not out. What is out is talking to your own bubble, which I see so much, especially on X, which is like a lot of jokiness with each other, a lot of like founders talking to the same founders and VCs talking to the same VCs. And like you're not thinking of a broader impact of what you're doing. And I always say, like, that's fine. Like, I think if you have fun doing that and that's a good outlet and like communication outlet for you, go ahead. I just like wouldn't expect that to actually move the needle for your business at all. Because if you're only talking to the same people and using the same lingo and not like inviting anyone else in, you're just staying really limited. So if you think of it as sort of like your fun outlet, that's great. But I don't think that does good things for your business because it also just comes across as like exclusive and like you only want to talk to certain people. And I'm just not a fan of that. So I would recommend thinking bigger and like thinking, how can I actually invite people in to talk to me instead of
Yeah.
give off the impression that we're a club and you're not in the club.
And I think that I really like the way that you position this too, because it's very similar. People want to talk to, you should be talking to your ICP, and it's very rare that that ICP is actually in your bubble. So it all goes
Exactly.
back to really being intentional about who are you creating this content for.
Yes.
It's rarely for your bubble or the connections that you already have. You're most
Yes.
typically writing for an audience that you're not in front of yet.
1,000%. It's not for the people that you just talked to at Davos and like already know, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to talk to them anyway. So like what's the point? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's also out is these like overly branded and designed graphics. So, a couple years ago, that was something we saw a lot of where people were using their company colors and a huge logo and like making it feel super company in your face, which is actually why I put a better example here. What's in is this more stripped down, more like personal kind of like even screenshots, like people screenshotting a Google Doc that they made. Like if you could make it yourself, that's actually what's in. So you can save yourself some time and design resources there. I still think there's a place for good design. I just think on social media specifically right now, people want the information without a lot of frills. So
Mhm.
I think a much more stripped down, or if you are working with design, just really keeping social in mind. And people want information that they can consume easily. So I think your time and effort is much better spent on creating like a chart that clearly lays out the pattern or, whatever you're seeing than making sort of PowerPoint slide looking graphics that you could just have given them in a much easier to read way.
Yeah.
Um, Also, what's out is like too much futuristic or AI imagery, which like a couple months ago we were all having fun with. We were like making cartoon versions of ourselves and stuff, and that was fun. But like everyone does it now, so it's kind of out because it again with that sort of flattening effect. Like unless you're extremely good at it, like you're an artist or you partner with an artist, which I think could be really cool.
Yeah.
If that's not, if you're coming at it from a very like average skill level, like it's just not really popping off in the same way now because everyone's like, yeah, we saw that. Like everyone else can do that too.
Yeah.
So just have a high bar. If you're gonna have that kind of imagery, it should be very cool. Also posting too much is something that's out. That was, kind of going back to our point about quality over quantity. Like posting too much just to say something is not going to, again, really move the needle. And I think you risk annoying your existing followers if you're posting all the time. So I usually suggest like maybe once a day on X, 1 to 3 times a day on X at most, a couple times a week on LinkedIn, not overdoing it because we've kind of, at least in my experience, seen a drop off in engagement if you're posting too often for your customer base. Um, TikTok is different. You can post a little more often, but just keeping in mind that it's more about, I always use the saying like post when you have something to say, not just when you want to say something. Like, you
Mhm.
should let content drive the cadence, not the cadence drive the content, where you're like, I said I was gonna post every day, and then what you post is, like, garbage, you know? So,
Yeah.
I think that's something that I would say is out. The unhinged tone, so this is sort of the Wendy's Twitter account and, like, Duolingo and stuff that have this sort of, like, "I can't believe a brand is talking like that," kind of tone. I think it worked, and it worked for them at a very specific moment in time, but I think there are so many copycats now that it's like everyone's just talking the same and using the same internet references and stuff, and it's not really gonna create a unique voice. So, all it is just, like, internet voice, and I think the novelty of that has worn off, and it's not really like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe they're talking like that anymore." It's just kind of like, "Okay, we've seen this."
Yeah.
So, I do not recommend doing the sort of, like, unhinged internet tone.
Yeah. Unless you're on TikTok. There's still a few brands on TikTok that are that are doing it and successfully, but it definitely rooted from those original. The Wendy's was the first one for sure.
Exactly, yeah, I think it's just rare that that is gonna yeah, I'm trying to keep this grounded in, like, what's best for most
Yeah,
people, and so if you can
absolutely.
show me a case where that makes sense, like, I'll be like, "That is so cool," but
Yeah.
for most people, that, like, probably is not what you wanna do.
Yeah, especially for B2B tech on LinkedIn, probably
Exactly,
not the
exactly.
best.
Exactly. It might get attention though. And the last one is milestones without context because I see this all the time. I saw this
Mm,
all the time at A16Z where portcos would want us to post about they got their 10,000th customer or like they reached this some kind of internal milestone and it's like it's not broadly interesting unless you can provide context for why your audience should care about it. Like,
mhm,
if I used a great example actually from Substack that they announced a new funding round or something along those lines. And what they did really well was explain what that was going to do for the platform. Like, now that we have these resources, what it means for readers is they will get more of whatever. Like,
mm,
that's what you
mhm.
really need to do because if you're just saying a number, your audience is like, is that good? Is that bad? Congrats, I guess, but, like, they don't work at your company, so they probably don't care about it in the way that you do. Even if you're trying to, like, signal something to investors, I think you can still post about it, you just really need to give that heavy context of the reason that changes anything. It's not just, like, you want people to respond with the emoji that's, like, has the party hat on and is excited. Like, it's you gotta give them a little bit more than that.
Yeah. I think, yeah, again, going back to who is this content really meant for and how does it provide value to them?
Exactly, exactly.
Alright, tell me about this Ben Lang example.
This is good because
Okay.
this is a really popular format right now where you recap something in a Google Doc like this
Hmm,
and screenshot it. This is everywhere. You'll if once you start to pay attention, you'll see it.
yeah,
And it's a way you can recap a podcast episode, you can recap a blog post, give the people what they want in bullets. Like they just want the information. They
mm,
don't want a bunch of other context and asides and everything. Like just give it to them like this in a way that's easy for them to read, easy for them to share. Another reason I think it's doing well is because a lot of people are in group chats, like especially on WhatsApp, especially in the tech world. And
mhm,
something like this is perfect for a group chat because it's zero click. You don't have to be like, okay, now I received that message. Now I'm going to click on the link. Like it's right there. You just want to read the thing and then be like, you're right. This was interesting. So if you can put it all in a single image, that is like very popular and doing really well right now.
yeah, absolutely. I love this. I haven't done a post like this yet, but I definitely will.
I think it actually was our most viral LinkedIn post ever was one
Uh,
that we did like that, at the end of it was like New Year's Eve. Distinctly remember it was New Year's Eve of like 1 year ago. We did exactly that, and it was like way above and beyond any kind of LinkedIn engagement we had ever seen before. So I
wow.
highly recommend it.
Well, maybe we'll do one recapping this,
Yeah, that'd be great.
alright, and last but not least.
Yeah, your personal social versus your company's, which is a very hot topic. I think a lot of people like to say that there's no function for company pages now, but I really disagree with that
Hmm,
because company pages are kind of the new landing page. Like the amount of effort that you're spending to make your website beautiful, you should spend at least a portion of that making your social media accounts beautiful because then when people come there, they are going to search you on a social platform, right? Like even in this time of searching on LLMs, like they probably will still natively go to your platform, go to X and search your company's name, go to LinkedIn and search your company's name. So think of it more as a landing page of like, what do
Mhm.
you want people to see when they get there? Are you hiring? Is that easy to see? Like, are you, did you just publish something that was really important that you want people to see? Is that pinned? Like, you need to think of what they're going to see when they first visit the page. So that's, I see the biggest function for the pages right now.
Yeah.
Even if you're not going to consistently post, they need to be a destination. So that's something to really keep in mind. And then keep the content on both complementary. Like you should be thinking, what can our CEO add to this piece of information that I can't post from the company page because it's super specific to her perspective and her voice.
Yeah.
But, so maybe the company page posts the original post and then the CEO quote posts it with some of her own thoughts on like, this has been a long time coming. Been working on this for 5 years or whatever. Like whatever that thing is, you can really think of them as working together.
Mhm.
And in that way, you also have to be really specific about your goal and your audience for each, because maybe that CEO is posting more for their community. Maybe they're focused on hiring and want to come across a certain way as the CEO. And maybe your page is more about giving informational resources to people, for example. Like you just have to define those so that they're not just repeating each other and just doing the same thing twice.
Mhm.
So that's really important. And we kind of talked about this before. What's too personal? Yeah, kind of the sitting next to an airplane with someone rule, like,
Yeah.
no like embarrassing personal details, nothing messy, like still think of it as a bit professional, but I think there's a time and place to share some personal details. Like I'm working with a client right now who's sending his son to college and he might want to write about like some lessons he hopes his son learns while he's there. Like something like that is tasteful and also lets people get to know you as a person, but
Yeah.
you're not delving into anything that's like inappropriate or embarrassing for your family or anything like that. So I think everyone's line is different of how much they want to share, but you should never be sharing anything that's like damaging in any way to your company or your own brand.
Yeah. What would you say to a founder or technical founder that doesn't really like this idea of wanting to be an influencer?
Yep.
How would you kinda, give them advice?
I just had this conversation with a technical founder this morning, so it's funny you say that.
Yeah.
I think you can still find your sweet spot. Like, I think that even within technical topics, you can still talk about things like hiring, for example. Like, that's maybe a little bit softer, but it's still highly professional. Like, would never suggest pushing someone in a direction that they don't feel comfortable with. I'm the same way. Like, I actually don't love posting about myself. I mostly only talk about work stuff.
Mhm.
But I think that people still want that and they want your unique perspective on it. And I think once you go through that content pillar exercise and say, like, okay, what are like 3 to 4 things that we can repeatedly talk about, even if it's technical, I think that you can find some good stuff there. And yeah, I guess I would just challenge that person to stay away too much from like very traditional Q&A and try to give what their unique lens is, what their personal experience working for certain companies has taught them. And there's still a lot there, I think, always of just like I'm working with an executive right now who worked at Microsoft for 5 years. And so she learned a lot of things there. And people want to know that. Like, what was it like to work at Microsoft? So that is
Yeah.
something that is technical, but like you can still get a lot of meat out of, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. For early stage teams, let's say fictional Series A company, who
Mhm.
should be owning content? Is that something you should hire for, use an agency, or should that be something the founder still owns?
I think the founder owns it with some support. That's
Okay.
my number one recommendation. They know their company the best. I think that you definitely risk losing your control of your messaging if you hire someone to take it completely over,
Mhm.
which is also why I suggest founders only be on the social platforms that they themselves are good at. You have to be a student of the platform first because that applies whether you're doing it yourself or you're hiring someone to do it because you also won't know if they're doing a good job.
Mhm.
So that's why I highly recommend like whatever levers you want to pull for social and marketing, you need to consume them first. Whether it's maybe you love newsletters, maybe you love podcasts, maybe you love LinkedIn, maybe you love TikTok X, whatever that thing is, learn it before bringing anyone on because it can really get away from you and you can waste so much money on it. So, I mean, that's not to plug myself too much, but that's what I'm trying to do in my next phase. Like, I'm starting a very lean, very like founder focused small agency because I am just afraid of founders spending these like huge overheads with companies that don't really understand what they're trying to do as a startup. And I've just seen that way too much. So I think that you need very strategic support at the beginning and you can grow that over time and find different projects that you might want to take on. But especially when you're early, you should should mostly be owning that messaging and just having someone support you to get it done and get it done in a professional and polished way.
Yeah. I agree. Another perspective here, you are the head of marketing and or head of growth, and you know there's a lot of value in creating content through your founders. How do you have that conversation with technical founders who maybe are a little bit skeptical?
What I've usually seen work is you start small and then people get excited and jealous when they see someone doing really well at it. So I
Okay.
think I recommend like focusing your effort around one or two people, and then sometimes people will start to be like, "Wow, that's really taking off. They're really bringing in deals. They're really raising their profile. People are asking them to go on their podcast." Like, so I recommend not trying to take on that messaging for a whole organization. I've just seen that fail a lot of times, and it's just too much to try to get everyone on board and be like, "We're all going to do this together." I recommend starting with one or two people, getting them really good at it, and then it kind of naturally is a use case where you can be like, "Well, John is doing it and it's looking pretty good." So that's how I would recommend going.
The old FOMO.
Yeah, it works among competitive people, which tech people are.
Oh,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, of
Well, thank you so much, Maria. This has been incredible. Um,
course.
on everything we talked about today. We're going to be compiling this into a very actionable playbook that we can share. I
Maybe
guess
as a Google Doc, maybe as a screenshot
maybe
Google
as a
Doc.
screenshot as a Google Doc. I like that idea. Anything for the founders that are watching this, if they do implement these, what are the types of things that they can see? What are the types of results they'll see from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think your personal brand is something you bring with you no matter what. Everyone says that, but it's true. Like if you end up needing to pivot your company or sell it and you have a bright future ahead of you, like this pays off at every level. So,
Mhm.
like I think number 1 is helping yourself have visibility is maybe sounds selfish, but it is good for your company, it's good for you. I also think inbounds, like, you just are gonna get that, like, you just will, because people will start to and it doesn't if especially if you don't make it feel salesy and you just are honest and just talk about what you're doing and what solution your company offers, people will see it and be like, "That's a problem that I'm having." So, I think that it helps in so many ways and also just building your own credibility. Like, if people start to really engage with your content and be like, "That person really knows what they're talking about," then anything in the future that you try to tell them or give them feedback on, they'll be like, they really know what they're talking about. So it shouldn't be that way. I wish everyone could just be trusted immediately, but we do have to prove our success a little bit in today's day and age. So
Yeah.
I think there's no negative result that you would see from it unless you like really do something crazy bad. But I think pretty much everything, if you put in effort for social and content, it will have positive results pretty much no matter what.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where should we direct them? This is your chance to
Yeah.
plug.
I'm just my normal name, Maria Lamagna Morales, on LinkedIn and TikTok. That's where I'm the most active. I'm on X, but not very often. I'll see it. I just don't post very often on X.
Yeah,
And then if you're interested in the 1-day summit that we're definitely doing more of them. And that's at theplatformteam.co. And you can find information there about how to join us for a future summit.
perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.